September 1939, with a single command, Adolf Hitler unleashes the Wehrmacht against Poland, igniting the Second World War. The Blitzkrieg, fast tanks, dive bombers, and motorized infantry overwhelms Polish defenses within days. Europe watches in horror as a sovereign nation is erased from the map. But for Hitler, this is only the beginning. His true ambition lies far to the east in the vast, resource-rich lands of the Soviet Union. Standard text. By June 1941, Hitler's Third Reich dominates most of Europe. France has fallen. Britain stands alone. From Norway to North Africa, the swastika flies over a conquered continent. Only one enemy remains that Hitler sees as both a threat and a prize: the Soviet Union. Its vast oil fields, wheat plains, and enormous population fuel his dreams of a German empire stretching to the Ural Mountains. The stage is set for the largest military operation in history. Standard text. The Soviet western frontier in 1941 is a land of uncertainty and tension. Millions of Red Army soldiers guard borders stretching thousands of kilometers. Yet despite clear intelligence warnings of a German military buildup, Stalin refuses to believe the threat is real. Soviet officers are forbidden from raising the alarm. The men who will face the full fury of the German assault are completely unprepared for the storm that is about to descend upon them. Standard text. General Georgy Zhukov and Marshal Semyon Timoshenko, the men tasked with defending the Soviet Union. As chief of the General Staff and Defense Minister, they work desperately to modernize the Red Army after the devastation of Stalin's purges, which had eliminated thousands of experienced officers. But time has run out. When the blow finally falls, even these capable commanders are caught off balance. The Soviet military machine, despite its size, is not ready. Standard text. June 22, 1941, 3:15 hours. 3 million German soldiers cross the Soviet border along a front stretching over 3,000 kilometers. Operation Barbarossa, the largest military invasion in human history, has begun. Artillery opens fire. Bombs rain down on sleeping Soviet cities. Thousands of Red Army aircraft are destroyed on the ground before sunrise. Stalin, awakened by the devastating news, falls silent for days. The world will never be the same again. Across the Soviet Union, the terrible news spreads like wildfire. Radio broadcasts carry Foreign Minister Molotov's words to millions of stunned citizens. Our cause is just. The enemy will be defeated. Victory will be ours. But the reality on the ground is catastrophic. Soviet border units are annihilated within hours. Entire armies are encircled before they can react. The first day of war brings a scale of destruction that defies all imagination. Standard text. Lithuania, June 1941. Entire towns burn as German forces surge through the Baltic states at terrifying speed. The population watches in shock as their homeland becomes a battleground. Army Group North drives relentlessly toward Leningrad, leaving fire and devastation behind it. Communications are cut, roads are choked with refugees and retreating soldiers. The Baltic states, occupied by the Soviets just 1 year earlier, are now consumed by the German advance. Standard text. German panzer divisions tear through Soviet lines with devastating speed and precision. The armored spearheads, supported by motorized infantry and close air support, advance hundreds of kilometers in the first days alone. Soviet commanders, unable to communicate due to destroyed radio networks, cannot coordinate any effective response. The blitzkrieg that conquered Western Europe in weeks is now unleashed against an enemy 10 times larger, and nothing seems able to stop it. Standard text. Dust clouds on the horizon mark the advance of the most powerful armored force ever assembled. Thousands of German tanks roll eastward across flat Soviet plains. Behind them, millions of infantry soldiers march on foot, covering 30 kilometers a day in brutal summer heat. The sheer scale of the German war machine overwhelms Soviet defenses. Entire fronts collapse in the first week. Senior Soviet commanders are shot for failing to hold the line. Panic spreads everywhere. Standard text. Wehrmacht infantry storm across Soviet defensive positions in the opening days of Barbarossa. These soldiers, hardened by 2 years of war in Poland, France, and the Balkans, move with speed and discipline. Artillery and dive bombers clear the path ahead. Red Army units, many leaderless after their officers are killed or captured, begin surrendering in enormous numbers. The German advance seems unstoppable. Leningrad, Moscow, and Kiev are all within reach. Standard text. Deep inside Soviet territory, German soldiers press forward through forests, rivers, and burning villages. Supply lines strain to keep pace with the rapid advance. Soldiers march through heat, dust, and the constant sounds of distant artillery. Letters home speak of endless roads and a country without end. For the first time, some Germans begin to feel the true immensity of the land they are trying to conquer. But for now, final victory still seems close and certain. Standard text. Operation Barbarossa is divided into 3 massive thrusts. Army Group North drives toward Leningrad. Army Group Center, the strongest force, aims directly at Moscow. Army Group South pushes deep into Ukraine toward vital oil fields. Together they deploy over 3.8 million men, 3,600 tanks, 2,700 aircraft, and 7,000 artillery pieces. It is an invasion force so enormous that it staggers the imagination of both friend and foe. History has never seen anything like it. Standard text. Army Group Center advances at breathtaking speed toward Moscow. Within days of crossing the border, German forces encircle massive Soviet armies at Białystok and Minsk. Hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers are trapped in huge pockets and forced to surrender. The scale of these early encirclements is staggering. Entire Soviet fronts cease to exist within days. German commanders send jubilant reports to Berlin. They believe the war in the East is nearly over. Standard text. German soldiers engage Soviet defenders in fierce fighting across rivers, marshes, and fortified positions deep inside enemy territory. The Red Army, despite catastrophic losses, begins to resist more stubbornly as the invasion deepens. Soviet soldiers defending their homeland and their families fight to the last bullet. German casualties, though still manageable, are rising faster than expected. The easy, rapid victory promised before the invasion is starting to feel less and less certain. Yuli, 1941. The battle continues along the full length of the Eastern Front. German infantry fight their way through Soviet defensive lines, village by village, forest by forest. The fighting is brutal and merciless on both sides. Soviet counterattacks, though often poorly coordinated, force German units to fight hard for every kilometer of ground. The initial euphoria of the Blitzkrieg's opening days is fading. The grim reality of fighting in the Soviet Union is becoming painfully clear. German infantrymen advanced through the scorched Soviet landscape. Burned-out villages and abandoned Soviet equipment mark the path of the retreating Red Army. But the Soviets are not simply running away. They are regrouping, rebuilding, preparing. Stalin's order is unambiguous, not a single step back without permission. Commissars execute soldiers who flee without orders. The Red Army, though bleeding heavily, refuses to break. Every town and river becomes a bitter, costly contest. Standard text. Wehrmacht soldiers deep inside Soviet territory rest briefly before the next push forward. They have already marched hundreds of kilometers from the border. The men are exhausted, their boots worn through, their uniforms caked with dust and dried blood. Supply convoys struggle on roads that turn to thick mud with every rainstorm. Yet orders from Berlin are clear. Push on. Push faster. Moscow must fall before winter arrives. Every day of delay brings the Wehrmacht closer to catastrophe. August 1941. The Battle of Smolensk rages for weeks, the bloodiest fighting yet seen on the Eastern Front. German forces trap another massive Soviet army in a great encirclement, capturing over 300,000 prisoners. But the battle delays the advance on Moscow by crucial weeks. Hitler controversially redirects armored forces south toward Ukraine instead of pressing on toward the capital. German generals argue bitterly with their Führer. A historic decision with terrible consequences is being made. Soviet prisoners of war stream eastward in columns stretching for kilometers, hundreds of thousands of men, many without food or water, marching toward an uncertain fate. The encirclement battles of 1941 produced the largest mass surrenders in military history. At Kiev alone, nearly 700,000 Soviet soldiers are captured in a single operation. Many will not survive captivity. The scale of the Soviet military collapse in 1941 is almost beyond comprehension, yet still the Red Army fights on. The Eastern Front in the summer of 1941 is a conflict of almost incomprehensible scale. From the Arctic Circle to the Black Sea, millions of men are locked in a struggle for survival. Burning cities, endless columns of refugees, and the constant thunder of artillery define daily life across a front spanning thousands of kilometers. This is not the swift, clean war that German propaganda promised. It is a war of annihilation, total, merciless, and it is only just beginning. Standard text. Soviet civilians caught in the path of the German advance face unimaginable suffering. Entire families flee eastward, carrying what little they can salvage. Villages are burned, crops destroyed, livestock slaughtered. Behind the German lines, SS Einsatzgruppen begin the systematic murder of Jewish communities and Soviet officials. Hundreds of thousands are shot in ravines and forests. The war in the East is unlike any conflict in European history. It is extermination as much as conquest. Italy's 57th Infantry Division fights alongside the Wehrmacht on the Eastern Front. Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia also commit troops to Barbarossa. Near Kharkov, Axis forces push deep into Ukraine's industrial heartland. But these Allied armies are less well-equipped than their German counterparts. Their presence will later prove dangerously unreliable when the tide of war begins to turn against Germany. Standard text. October 1941, Operation Typhoon, the final German drive on Moscow, begins with spectacular initial success. 3 Soviet armies are encircled near Vyazma and Bryansk, with over 500,000 men captured in days. The road to Moscow finally seems open. But autumn rains immediately turn the roads to deep mud, grinding the advance to a halt. German tanks and vehicles sink to their axles. The dreaded Russian Rasputitsa, the mud season, has arrived to help defend the Soviet capital. Standard text. November 1941, temperatures plunge to -20, then -30 degrees Celsius. German soldiers, equipped only for a summer campaign, suffer terribly from the cold. Frostbite claims thousands of casualties daily. Engines freeze solid overnight. Lubricants turn to gel. The Wehrmacht, now within sight of Moscow's suburbs, is grinding to a complete stop. The men who set out in June confident of victory in weeks now face a brutal Soviet winter with nothing but summer uniforms. Standard text. In the south, the epic siege of Sevastopol unfolds on the Crimean Peninsula. The Soviet naval fortress, defended by the Black Sea Fleet and a determined Red Army garrison, holds out for nearly 8 months under relentless German and Romanian assault. Artillery barrages of extraordinary intensity pound the city day and night, yet Soviet defenders refuse to yield. The siege of Sevastopol becomes one of the great symbols of Soviet resistance and of the Wehrmacht's growing strategic exhaustion. December 5, 1941, Marshal Zhukov launches a massive Soviet counteroffensive before Moscow. Fresh divisions rushed from Siberia slam into the exhausted German lines. The Wehrmacht, its soldiers half frozen, its supply line stretched to breaking point, is hurled back from the capital. For the first time in the entire war, the German army is forced into a major strategic retreat. The myth of Nazi invincibility is shattered forever. Operation Barbarossa has failed. Standard text. Operation Barbarossa has failed. Hitler's dream of conquering the Soviet Union in a single summer campaign lies in ruins. The Wehrmacht has suffered over 800,000 casualties by December 1941. The Soviet Union, though devastated, is still fighting and growing stronger by the month. The war that was supposed to last 6 weeks will last 4 more years. What began as the greatest offensive in human history will end in the ashes of Berlin. The road to Germany's total destruction begins here.